Welcome to Third Degree. Should Dagga be legalized? A Johannesburg couple says yes. In fact, they are so convinced they're taking their case to the Constitutional Court. The matter came to a head when they were raided for marijuana possession at their home. Megan Small investigates. Dagga, weed, marijuana, ganja, cannabis. This wild plant is a banned substance, but there are those who believe it should be legalized, or at the very least decriminalized. For Rastafarians, smoking ganja connects them spiritually to their God.
Cannabis is a means whereby we are able to worship our Creator, right? To be able to put us in that state of mind whereby we would be able to give thanks and praise on the highest level.
But on the other side, police fight hard to stop it being sold on our streets.
They say we don't want to work, we just want to smoke. Sit up in the sun, taking life in your jug. They say we don't want to work.
One of the few people to pursue a legal case in favor of cannabis is Gareth Prince. His campaign began in the late 90s after the Law Society of the Cape of Good Hope refused to admit him as an attorney. They said he wasn't a fit and proper person, as he'd had 2 previous convictions for possession. Prince, a Rastafarian, took them to the Cape High Court. They ruled against him. He appealed, lost again, then in 2000 turned to the Constitutional Court.
Now, when I made my application, I had to, one of the questions they asked was as to whether one has got a criminal record or not. And seeing that Rastafari teaches us to be honest, I revealed that I've got a criminal record and that I've been convicted for possession of cannabis. And that obviously must not have gone down too good with the councillors at the Law Society. And they deemed me not fit and proper to be an attorney.
He eventually lost.
What happened in Prince was that the court, the majority of the court, found that the fact that the legislation did not allow a special exemption for the use of Dagga in religious practice didn't mean that the law stood to be condemned, because it was found that it was very difficult to meet the general objectives of the law if there was going to be a special exemption.
The Constitutional Court's main task is to rule on whether laws, new or old, are constitutional or not, whether they conflict with the freedoms enshrined in our Bill of Rights. It's to this court that members of the public can turn. And this is exactly what Joburg residents Julian Stobbs and Myrtle Clark plan to do. Dubbed the Dagga couple, they will try to persuade the court that they have the right to smoke cannabis unhindered.
We are advocating the complete re-legalization of Dagga in South Africa. And what that means is it does not mean decriminalization. Decriminalization means that you are no longer made into a criminal, but it is still wrong. We want the plant to be reinstated into the pharmacopoeia of the medicine cabinets of every single person in South Africa who has the right to self-medicate themselves.
The couple live on their plot in the north of Gauteng. They're in the television industry.
It is my substance of choice to aid creativity. It gives you that shift out of your normal everyday mindset and just makes you think a little bit deeper about things and makes you look a little bit closer at the world around you. And as a creative person, I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate that it is a plant and it's a natural substance that I can use to aid in my creativity.
Last night I went to...
They've been smoking for 20 years in the comfort of their home. But early last year, they were asleep when police raided after a tip-off about a drug lab on the premises.
We'll shout them down. The front gate of the property was lifted completely out of here with some sort of hydraulic device. They smashed all of this. We had to fix the motor, and in they came. They left the vehicle outside, and 7 people came to our kitchen door. And it's a scary thing for us. We're not really used to such violence and blasphemy and the dark side of human nature. So we were very surprised, very disorientated, 2 o'clock in the morning, deep sleep, and they're shouting and screaming at us. But at that point, I think they were after a meth lab or something.
Yeah.
But all they found was a couple of old stoners. So this gate, they were about to...
And where were you?
I was in my underwear. I opened the door, 7 policemen. Oh! I let them in. I let them in.
So did they eventually break the...
No, to avoid them breaking it, to stop them breaking it, I opened the door and they came in. And a 6-hour ordeal, eh?
Wow.
6 hours in here. They had to wait till the daytime because they had to search the whole property because they were convinced there was a laboratory of some description. So they taunted us and prodded us and spat at us and messed around with our heads till sunrise. And then they took us round the property. They broke the door down of my foreman's kaya. They had him on the ground with a gun in his neck. He's innocent, man. He doesn't know anything about anything. And by 7 o'clock in the morning, we were on the way to jail. And they'd had their fun.
They were arrested, later released on 1,000 rand bail. But tired of feeling like criminals, they've decided to take their case to the highest court in the land.
The first question that arises is, well, what right are they asserting? And they may assert a constitutional right to privacy or freedom of the person. And then the question will be, does the prohibition which exists in our law on the use of Dagga be such as to infringe the right?
Coming up, does this case have any legal merit? Welcome back. So is Dagga worse than alcohol? Joburg partners dubbed the Dagga couple say it's not, and they've taken the matter to the Constitutional Court. They want the drug legalized.
Because they're not.
Myrtle and Julian were arrested for possession of cannabis. But the charge is on hold until their case is heard in the Constitutional Court. They are challenging the ban on this wild plant.
What we want is it to revert back to 80 years ago when it could grow anywhere and anybody could use it. It wasn't a forbidden fruit, because the minute you make something illegal anywhere, human nature dictates that you're all going to go out and find it. That's how it is with the human nature. So we think, well, we know that once you re-legalize or decriminalize any plant, any substance, the glamour goes out of it. Do you remember when you were 18 and you went for a drink? How boring was that? Underage drinking rocked. And now you're 18 and in a bar and it's like, oh, the fun's gone. That's what we believe will happen with Dagga in the end.
Biggest misconception is that cannabis is addictive. It is not addictive. The second misconception is that cannabis smokers are all stoners and all they do is they sit on the couch, watch TV and eat knickknacks. Look at us, we're very active, we're very healthy, we don't even have a TV in our home, we do not spend a lot of time on the couch. We have thousands upon hundreds of thousands of examples of perfectly normal, functional members of society who are the best at what they do, but they come home in the evening and instead of having a glass of wine, they have a joint.
Not everyone agrees that cannabis is a mild and harmless relaxant.
I think it's going to place us in the same position that we are with alcohol. Alcohol is a legal, socially acceptable drug in our society, and we find that most of our problems are stemming from alcohol. So we're creating another problem that we are not going to be able to face and to deal with successfully. Because you're looking at then you have to look at more rehabilitation centers. There's not enough infrastructure to monitor and control and regulate the legalization of Dagga. So there's a lot of other factors and a lot of impact it would have not only on Sanko but on everything other aspect of society. How would we monitor underage Dagga smoking? How would we control the THC content in these Dagga? How will we make sure that there's other components that causes harm? How would we reduce those components that you find in Dagga that can harm people?
The couple plan to argue that smoking cannabis in private is their own choice, that no one should be able to trample on their human right to put whatever they want into their own bodies.
We believe sitting in our home at the end of the really hectic day on a movie set and smoking a joint is the same thing. We're not breaking the law. The law is a statute that a person made. But the reason we're doing this is because the law in our hearts, we know the law's wrong. We smoke joints, and again, we're sorry, we're sorry, but we can't help it.
It's a classic statement of individual rights, which is part of what our Constitution upholds. That is to say that there are many things that we make choices about as individuals and assert rights to do those things. But that doesn't mean that the state can have no role in regulating the use of those rights.
They feel that their case is completely different to that of Gareth Prince's.
The case with Gareth Prince against in the Constitutional Court in the late 90s. Gareth Prince was applying to practice as a lawyer, and his case was Gareth Prince versus the South African Law Society. He was not representing anybody. It's very important to note here that we are representing the cannabis culture in South Africa. We are representing all users of cannabis in South Africa. We are not going only because of our own case and because of the police were here in our own home. We are doing this for everybody.
That won't count, because if you want to use the majority voice, then you would do so through Parliament, exercising your political rights. The court is not going to determine this matter on what it thinks the majority might believe about the question. The issue is simply whether the legislation that has been passed is such that the state is able to justify it in court.
Yes, it is the human right to make their own choices and decisions, but it must be informed decisions, and it must be based on fact and what current research is showing us about addiction. And it's not only, I agree that when you say it's only affecting their lives, but we're looking at Sanko at the bigger population of people. If we look at Dagga, for instance, coming into our clinics, it's our second highest drug that we treat in all of our treatment centers. And one needs to ask yourself why. Because it's addictive. People get addicted to it as well. People combine it with other drugs like Niobe, which is a major problem for us. People don't only stay with the Dagga. Very few people do that. They will experiment, try different things with it, and that is where the problem starts happening for us. And also in terms of human rights, we can say the same about cigarette smoking. We can say the same about then people can be allowed to use heroin or use cocaine in their own homes as well, because it's their choice then, and they only use it for recreational use.
Clearly, the Dagga couple have their work cut out for them.
Why does the government think they're protecting me from this plant? I can tell them after 30 years of smoking it that it's done me more good than harm, categorically. And I'll be the judge of it anyway. I will ingest what I want into my body. We've got countless medicinal plants surrounding us in this garden. there are so much more pressing subjects. Why is Dagga still on the top of the list of being the root of all evil and the government has to protect us from it? We're going to find out why.
After the break, we debate the matter with Sanka. And Third Degree is back. Well, it's not the first time there have been calls to legalize Dagga in South Africa. This time, the Constitutional Court has been asked to weigh in on the matter. So, is this drug a gateway to other more serious addictions, or should it be classed as a mild intoxicant? Here to debate the issue, Dagga activists Myrtle Clark and Audrey Vermeulen, who is the director of Phoenix House at Sanka. Now, once again, please note the views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of Third Degree. Let me begin with you, Myrtle. This issue of legalizing Dagga, one of the arguments used against it is that we have such a serious drug problem in South Africa with both alcohol and drug abuse. Is this just not going to make things worse? Because for many young kids, this is the gateway to other drugs.
Well, it's very much in debate whether it is the gateway drug or not. This was one of the foundations of the huge propaganda campaign that has been raging for almost 100 years against what is essentially a benign herb. And if you are going to tell parents that if their kids smoke Dagga, they are going to inject heroin tomorrow, then certainly it is going to demonize the plant. But there's no scientific evidence that ingesting, smoking, vaporizing, or however you choose to take Dagga, that chemically it leads to taking harder drugs. And it is certainly the case that most people, before they try their first joint, they have most certainly had a cigarette and they have most certainly had some alcohol. So to class Dagga as the gateway drug is not correct.
But whether or not it's a gateway drug, I mean, the point is that a kid trying it will think, oh, I want something stronger, harsher, more exciting. I mean, isn't that part of the problem?
It has always been human nature to explore our minds and to explore shifts in consciousness. If you can look at human nature right from the beginning of time, we have always used different ways to shift our consciousness. And the prohibition of Dagga does nothing but demonize the plant and does not educate people, children and adults alike, on first of all, the benefits of the herb, and secondly of all, of course, we are not saying that this is a harmless herb. We are saying it's a mild intoxicant. And if you demonize it and put the fear of all of the prohibition propaganda into people, it doesn't help to educate people at all, because it is also human nature to try things that are illegal.
Let me bring you in there, Audrey. You'd obviously disagree, because you've had a lot of experience with young kids, and it's a problem for you.
It's definitely a huge problem for us, and we see the kids coming to our centers, and we see that that's our second biggest problem in our country before alcohol or after alcohol. So for us, it's definitely not an innocent drug. It's definitely not a soft drug like most people try to make it out for, because there is chemicals involved that affects the brain, that affects the development, and there's other physical changes that it also affects. So for us, there are definitely dangers to using it, and we also see it still, although it's not the only gateway drug, but it could be one of the gateway drugs, because it makes you lose your fear for drugs. And as soon as you lose that fear, then you are more open-minded to try other things, and this is where we have a problem with that.
The argument would be leveled, then why not alcohol as well? Because, I mean, if you look at alcohol abuse in South Africa, it's severe and appalling.
Yes. It is. Definitely 80% of our admissions to our treatment centers throughout the country is due to alcohol abuse.
But you're not advocating for an alcohol ban?
No.
Why is that?
We're advocating for the ban as well of alcohol, to saying we have to do something about it because it's out of hand. And if we add to that problem a Dagga as well being legalized, we will not be able to control that problem. We don't have the infrastructure as a country to deal with the monitoring of all the legislation that will help us to deal with that problem effectively. And our concern is the young people. If you are an older person, you have the right to choose, but under 18-year-olds still are affected by any kind of chemical that they put into their bodies.
I mean, isn't it the case that you could have gone about this another way? I mean, many countries have successfully decriminalized the drug.
If people need to understand the difference between legalization and decriminalization. Decriminalization doesn't say that it's okay to smoke. It just reduces the penalties. And you might get a small fine or a slap on the wrist and you won't be sent to jail. So in that way it is kind of making a concession. But the difference is huge. If Dagga was decriminalized in South Africa, it would still be illegal for us as consenting adults to grow, smoke or even sell Dagga in South Africa. And then you get the huge contradiction coming in where you are maybe allowed to possess small amounts of the drug, but you are not allowed to sell it. So where are you getting that from?
So where do you sit though on this argument? I mean, the problem is that in South Africa, the drug problem is out of control. And I think Audrey's point about losing one's fear for the drug weighs in quite heavily here. That whether or not it does terrible things, and that is debatable because there are people who say that for some you take one hit of Dagga and it can cause serious problems. You're going to have an addictive nature to begin with if that is the case. Why add to the burden?
Because it is a benign herb, and because a lot of
not for everyone. It's not a benign herb. I mean, it can trigger psychotic episodes.
I'm not saying that it's harmless. I'm saying that it's a benign herb. That the propaganda surrounding the prohibition has been very successful, and it's a very emotive issue. Like you say that you lose the fear for other drugs through Dagga. I don't think that that's true at all. I think that if people educate themselves properly, and I'd just like to point out that a lot of the education material on drug prevention and control systems in South Africa are severely outdated. They're not looking at the latest scientific research. They're not debating the latest things that are going on around the world. Even Sanka's website, with all due respect, is incredibly out of date, and there's a lot of misinformation on that. So what we are advocating is proper education. Do not educate your child through fear. If you say to them, you smoke one Dagga joint and tomorrow morning you're going to be injecting heroin under your toenails, it is going to be a lot less effective than if you educate your child on the actual facts, the scientific facts.
Although sometimes feared, as a mother of two young girls who are, at some point are going to be exposed to a whole range of things, I'm not above a little bit of fear every now and again. But this issue of it being benign, that is a debatable thing. It's not a fact that this is a benign. I mean, some people have been known to take one hit of Dagga and trigger a psychotic episode.
Definitely, there is a link through research that there's definitely, if you have a predisposition to any psychiatric illness, especially schizophrenia, that there might be a chance that Dagga might trigger that predisposed condition. You also have people that already have a psychiatric condition self-medicating with Dagga, making their symptoms even worse, and not being able to use westernized medication for that purpose to deal with the psychiatric condition.
But there is an argument to be made from Myrtle's point of view that the more restrictions you put on a drug, the more kids are going to want it. That is the nature of young teenagers.
You definitely have that concern as well. But if you look at the whole debate around the prohibition of Dagga, there's pros and cons to it as well.
Okay,
so
we're going to have to leave it there. Sorry to interrupt both of you. Thank you very much. It's a good debate and one that we could have continued for a bit longer. That is it for this week, but do get in touch. Send us your comments. You can fax us on 011-880-8883 or email us on thirddegree@etv.co.za. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and join us again next week for more investigative journalism. Until then, goodbye.